July issue, which is so important. I hope we can kind of get ourselves a little bit centered and focus on what important work needs to be done, and our voices are really need to be heard. So this is a reading by, it's called Holy Dispatch by Asha Hauser. It's from a book called Conversations with the Sacred, a collection of prayers. Some days it feels like it's every day. I want to know when to speak up and disrupt injustice, even in the seemingly insignificant moments. Each moment is significant. Each day, an opportunity arises when we can bear witness and choose to disrupt injustice. Spirit of life, give us the courage and the wisdom to become holy disruptors and truth tellers when called upon. Grant us the humility to know that this is a practice, and when we make mistakes, we will try again with love and patience. We are called to the caring and growing of souls, and we are all in this together. As people of faith, who affirm the interdependent web of which we are all a part, we are called to become holy disruptors because we are all in this together. Let it be. I'm going to light a chalice. If I can find my cursor. All right. So, all right, I hope we're all centered. I'm going to. You can control, by the way, on your own screens, whether you have a full screen or a partial. And actually, I want to get myself into probably the speaker view here. Oh, Pablo, I think that went to you. Okay, so let's go back then to, I can't find myself here. So let's see. Pablo, I see just your screen right there. Can we maybe exit to full view? Okay, lots of folks here, so thanks so much. Let's get started. The agenda for today is that we are going to first just go through a real brief briefing on the bill, sort of the state of play of that, what the status of it is. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the National Defense Appropriations Act that is coming up, that Senator Schatz and the bipartisan group has an amendment that's of particular interest for us. We'll break into some small group discussions, probably around 3:30. And immediately following that, we'll be conducting right here, right now, in options for submitting letters. So during then the post briefing that we will have from 4 to 4:30, you can continue on. We'll talk about some of the opportunities to how you can submit your letters. And well, we'll have discussed that, but we will, for those of you who conduct these for your congregations, we'll talk a little bit about how you can do that and maybe how to do it right here, right now via Zoom. And we'll do a few tips. So at a previous meeting, some folks had asked to learn about that. So I want to see if we can get back to the screen share. And Pablo, I don't know if it's an issue with, because we're both in here, but I'm going to try it one more time. And we'll try to keep this up. There we go. All right. So this is a number I actually would like everybody to write down. You're going to have opportunities. Because one of the things I was thinking about, especially with the comments that the president made, the disparaging comments about the far left under the guise of social justice, that we should speak up, and we can call. It's an easy thing that we can maybe even all do. It's just make a phone call, talk from your heart, and tell our members what's acceptable, what's not, and what we feel is our values. So just keep this number around. And you can also be sending, a posting to your Facebook page with your senators and members, and also tweeting. So just keep this in mind. So we will put in the chat a little bit later some of the information, but we do have about UUSJ some information where to always be able to find things. So if you're looking, for example.
Could you go back to that? I was in the middle of writing it down and it disappeared.
Oh, the phone number? There you go.
Thank you so much.
It is, and I should move my folks over here. I'm having trouble with my mouse to move the gallery section there. So it's 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. You will ask them for your senator or your House member, and they will connect you directly. And here's some other information. We will put most of this in the chat, but on our webpage, there's a place under how to kind of get engaged called a virtual exhibit booth. And it has a lot of information about how to engage with us, and some other links. And also the advocacy page always has our issues and our action alerts there. So that's always a good place also to have kind of bookmark for you. There's my contact information. I'll bring this up again at the end of the meeting, and it'll be in the chat. And so that you can be in contact with us. UUSJ has 4 issue areas. They are immigration, we have climate, environmental justice, we have economic justice, and also defending our democracy. And this particular issue today that we're here on, the Justice and Policing Act, is one that cross-cuts many of the issues that we have. So these are the particular bill was it was introduced in the House, and it passed in the House, and that the bill has a companion bill in the Senate. And during the same time period, the Senate the Republicans had their own bill. It was Senate Republican, it was called the Justice Act, and that was Senate Bill 3985. It's mentioned, and there's a link in the handout that's very helpful for you if you want to really find out what the differences between the 2 bills are. We'll spend only just a couple of minutes on this, and I've asked Bob Denniston, our board chair, to give us a little bit of briefing on that particular aspect of the 2 different bills that we're dealing with. So again, there was a bill introduced in the House, it passed, it has a companion bill in the Senate, which is the bill that we're supporting. The Republicans during the same time period, I believe it was June 24th, had a vote. It did not meet cloture, which means it did not get the votes necessary to move forward. And it was sponsored by Senator Tim Scott, a Republican from South Carolina, as the chamber's only Black Republican. And there are elements of the bill that are in agreement with the Senate bill. And that's what Bob will talk about now. So Bob, if you could unmute yourself and talk about that a little bit.
Lavona, I'm maybe a little confused. Could you tell me again what you want me to cover? Because I think there was.
So it's what are the similar things between the 2 bills that we think will be the space that we'll be moving forward on. That was covered in that in the New York Times article that we have.
Yeah, the New York Times article of the 23rd of this month really covers it nicely. It's Senate GOP unveils narrow policing bill, setting up a clash with the Democrats. And so what we have here is a bill that was did not go forward on the Senate side, but then was basically no further debate. But on the House side, the next day they released a bill that now has been passed with a substantial majority.
So that I covered, but I was just thinking if you could cover those things that were similar to the bills to move forward, that the Indiana senator.
Yeah, there's one thing in particular that's of interest is the qualified immunity. I'm just going to read a little bit of that, and there's a particular opportunity here for collaboration between the Senate Republicans and Democrats. It has to do with, I'll just read this. The bill changes something called qualified immunity, and this is a big deal, and it's come up from time to time, which courts have interpreted to give police officers and other public officials broad immunity from being sued if they have violated the constitutional rights of an individual. The bill would make it easier for plaintiffs to recover damages against police officers if the officer is sued and found guilty. And so what we have here is an opportunity for working together. Tim Scott, who lambasted the Democrats for basically not allowing the Senate Republican bill to go forward, was very upset about that and said, Scott has made it clear he believes eliminating qualified immunity, a proposal rejected by the White House, would amount to a poison pill. Although a small group of Senate Republicans led by Senator Mike Braun of Indiana is working with Democrats to introduce a measure in the coming days that would do just that. And that was dated the 23rd of June. So there's some wiggle room apparently around this one, because that for the White House and for the Senate Republicans, that was basically a non-starter. The Democrats, they really wanted that in to avoid this qualified immunity, which makes many police officers, when they've been convicted of doing some wrongdoing, makes them immune from further prosecution, in particular civil lawsuits. So that seems to be a potential for some collaboration now, because we've got a small group of Senate Republicans, Democrats working together.
Yeah, it's in terms of, sort of the outlook on this, it's going to be tough. I think there is commitment that they want to all pass something. I don't think it's going to be the comprehensive package that the House has put forward, that Senator Booker and others are co-sponsoring, sponsoring in the Senate. But the provisions that were outlined as our key provisions cluster around, there's kind of two sections that really cluster. And here I have up on the screen the Congressional Black Caucus, which is primarily responsible for pulling together the bill. And they've worked also with the Leadership Council very closely. We've been working on these issues for a long time. These are the primary areas that are being covered in that bill, which is very comprehensive. So in that, you, of course, right here, right now, you find something that speaks to your heart, and you can, we want to support. For Democrats, the message is going to be about co-sponsoring this bill. For the Republicans, it's going to be the provisions, to support these provisions going into any bill that goes forward. There's kind of what I consider two clusters of the asks here. One more around targeting of individuals and treatment of individuals in an immediate situation versus some of the accountability issues. So as you saw in our talking points, the key provisions that are kind of outlined there have to do with prohibiting federal, state, and local law enforcement with this racial and religious profiling, which has been a major issue, and it mandates training and racial profiling for police. It requires collecting data as well on those issues. It bans the chokeholds and the no-knock warrants for drug cases, which has been, hugely problematic. And so the federal funding would be tied to the bans. One of the things I do want to raise up is that much of the work that we heard about that needs to be done, if you were participating at General Assembly and you're familiar with the action immediate witness that was also passed at General Assembly, is a lot of the work of where do funds go, or things like that, are at the local and state level, not at the federal level. Having something like this at the federal level, and the reason we were excited to see this come forward, is that there aren't a lot of levers at the federal level. A lot of it is tied to funding. And when we get to the military equipment one in particular, that's one of the areas. So, but these are areas that the federal government can take some action on, and a lot of it will be tied to funding, accepting of funds. So also limit in use of deadly force. So this is requiring police to exhaust all non-lethal methods before using deadly force. So it's coming up with a national standard on that. The provision around military equipment is, I think, is a really great concern. The militarization, not only in the equipment, but it's a culture, an attitude, and with many of our veterans coming back from war situations that are getting jobs in the policing area, is a change in our culture about what and how they interact and appear in our communities. So this military equipment on American streets, it's often referred to as 1033 program. This is this military equipment grade, things that are surplus kind of, or from the Pentagon, that is given to states and locals. And so this 1033 program is really important, and there's an amendment that we'll talk about a little bit later that is going to specifically look at this in the National Defense in the Authorization and Appropriation Act. And so we'll talk about that more. But also that piece of it requires also the body and dashboard cameras uses, which had previously been approved and encouraged coming out of work during the Obama administration for the Policing for the 21st Century Task Force. But then when the Trump administration came in, those provisions were just not encouraged. So the other area that we're raising up is about requiring police to use these body cameras in addition to the defunding the military equipment piece. But you can see these are all part of a really comprehensive program, and they're all important to make it really whole. The likelihood in this Congress of getting such a program, as I mentioned, is probably not possible during this cycle of the 116th Congress. But we're hopeful that we will be able to advance some of these. So what is important is that we keep these issues, the heat on in terms of these issues, that we're paying attention, that we want them to take action, and that inaction is just unacceptable. And with the momentum that is coming out after the death of George Floyd, in addition to all the other deaths that have taken place and the unprecedented number of protests and marches, we believe we're at sort of a tipping point moment. And I think it draws on us that we really take a look at this very closely. So this is the, which is emerging now. And this is a bipartisan amendment. It's being put forward by Senator Schatz's office, who's a Democrat from Hawaii, with Senator Murkowski, and Republican from Alaska, and Senator Paul from Kentucky. So just today, the amendment number came out. It's 2252. And we're going to have a separate briefing on Wednesday at 4 p.m. to go into more detail, and a staff person from Senator Schatz's office will be with us. He was unable to be with us today to address this. So if you're interested in this particular aspect of the bill and this amendment, please join us at 4 p.m. on Wednesday. So it would really stop civilian police departments from receiving unnecessary military equipment from the Pentagon. And there's an ACLU report. We'll put that information in the chat box for you also, that talks about, like with SWAT teams, which very often it's used. There's more cases where this has been not helpful or successful, or that has led to deaths, than has really been good. Now, there are situations it's been brought up in situations like Sandy Hook or terrorists or other things, that there is equipment, that is required, but not in civilian. We're talking about not in civilians and used against, civilians in peaceful protests. The vote could be as soon as July 20th. And so we're going to actually ask you also to make phone calls. We'll probably be putting together an action alert after we have the conversation with Trelane from Senator Schatz's office. Bob?
Yeah, by way of example, grenades, grenade launchers, bayonets, tear gas would be banned, but not defensive equipment. For example, armor, you see these officers have, that would still be allowable, but not the armor-piercing weaponry and the like.
Mm-hmm. There's guidelines also about in what circumstances these things are used. And I think that's very important, because if you're having a peaceful protest, as we did here in Washington, D.C. in front of the White House, and military style, police coming, and then even the president calls on, the military to come out against citizens. Folks, we really have to step up and just say this stuff is not acceptable. And this goes against all our values. So once again, here's that switchboard number. If you even want to be calling, we especially need calls to the Republican offices. We would really like them to support the amendment, this amendment. And again, I hope you can join us on Wednesday. So we're gonna do some breakout rooms shortly, and so you can have some further discussion. Let's field those if there's some questions that we can maybe address now. If I can get back, since I can't see my cursor, which has disappeared. Maybe we can end. Can you end the sharing screen? And Paolo, do you see any questions in the?
No, I do not see any questions at this moment in the chat, and I cannot stop your share screen.
Okay.
Do that.
All right. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah. So is there anybody that, let's see, let me just get out of it that way. And I need to move this over here and get the screenshot. Thanks very much. Sorry about that, folks. So are there anybody have anything to offer as information that they might have to offer to this particular issue? And again, a lot of this work needs to be done at the local level, but we want to be putting pressure on at both levels, at the federal level as well, about what we can, that we want action. It's unacceptable to continue with the way things have been. I don't see any questions. Okay, anybody to offer? So what we'll do is just go into the breakout rooms for a little while so you can have some small group discussion, and then we'll come back and talk about some of the next steps that we can take, and maybe some questions come up.
Francis has raised his or her hand.
I'm sorry, who was that?
That was Francis.
Okay.
Francis, do you want to take yourself off mute and speak? Francis Mannix.
Hi, Francis.
Hi, how are you? The question I had is, if you don't expect any success in this current Congress and this current administration, and after the election, hopefully there will be new people in Congress and in the Senate. Why would we concentrate our energies now on the current people when there'll be new people after the election? What are we keeping whom are we keeping our pressure on?
Mm-hmm.
There'll be new people later on.
Some, and it depends, in the Senate, how, that's going to be a very small margin. So most of these people will be the same senators that we'll be dealing with. And so it's keeping this momentum going. And very often from one Congress to the next, so we'll be leaving the 116th, we'll be going into the 117th for 2 years. Those bills will be reintroduced, sometimes nearly immediately. So getting more sponsors, getting more people to commit to these things is of value to us. Mhm.
Yeah, the other thing is relationship building is a really important part of what we do. So trying to establish these relations and knowing that people tend to move around. But once we have those people identified and keep in contact with them and then refresh our arguments as new evidence becomes available or there's new momentum. So I think we all know what happened after Sandy Hook. There was a lot of interest for a while, and then nothing happened in Congress. So part of this, as Lavona's suggesting, is keeping up the pressure, keeping visible this really incredibly important issue.
Chautauqua is going on right now, and it just this morning, one of the people who was on his name is Cedric Alexander, was on President Obama's task force for 21st century policing, and he was saying he really thinks this is a tipping point, and he believes now that although what they came up with was what they referred to sort of as a blueprint for moving forward for local and state, for locals and state, as well as some of the necessary things to happen. But one of his most important things is that we have to keep up the pressure to keep this issue moving forward. That just going, again, back to what we've done before is not acceptable. And until we keep bringing this up and raising the issue of systemic racism that exists, that is affecting some of the cultures. And the important thing too about that Mr. Alexander was speaking about is that our communities are our police and our police are our communities, and they need to reflect each other. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And so top down and bottom up is part of the pressure that we want to keep up there. Let's see.
I think Ursula had a question.
Okay, Ursula, unmute.
Yeah, would you mind repeating the things we want to get rid of, like grenades and launchers, and the things that we want to keep?
Mhm. Bob, do you want to mention?
Yeah, there's quite a list of weapons, military-grade weapons that would be eliminated. That is, would be not be eligible. It includes armor-piercing bullets, grenades, grenade launchers, bayonets, and a whole lot of other heavy-duty sorts of things. And there'd be some restrictions on heavy vehicles, tanks, what we call tanks and the like. But what would be still allowed is armor to protect police from whatever they need protecting from. And you can see that all over in the images that Lavona had there and elsewhere. So that would be allowed. But the requirement would be for body cameras and for vehicle cameras as well, so that there's better evidence gathering as part of this this amendment to Defense Authorization Act.
One of the things that we'll do, because this just came out today from Senator Schatz's office, is a link to about a 2.5-page document, and so that will provide a lot of the details, and we can make that available to you. But it just came out this morning. So what I'd like to do now then is move into, so you can have some smaller group discussion about this. This is sort of something that we do every month when we do these briefings, and then come back and kind of debrief from that very quickly. You might want to identify somebody if there's a particular question or comment or concern. And hopefully you all did see that at the General Assembly, there was an action of immediate witness. There was a link to it in your handout. It is not directly having to do with federal legislation or the federal level. A lot of it is about congregational action, but we felt this was in within that realm of trying to address some of these issues that are so important and to, raise up, with our members. So what you will be moved automatically into a room, and I'm going to try to put them about 4 people in a room. We'll have about a little bit more than maybe 10 minutes. I'll give you a warning, you'll get a message that I can send to everybody. And then there'll be a countdown when there's like 1 minute left. Okay? And you can maybe also share like, you know, what you want to do, or what maybe with your congregation, or anything you so choose as a group. Okay? So we're going to go do that now and come back in about 10 minutes. So there we go.
And this is random assignment, is that right, Lamona?
Correct. Actually, it'll be a larger group. I might move people around. Let's see.
There we go.
Oh, hey. Hey, folks.
Okay, let's see if I can see who's here.
And I just want to flag for folks that our session, at least, is being recorded. I think that might be because I'm the person recording this session. So just bear that in mind as we go forward into our conversation. And if you feel like you, whoops, accidentally said something you don't want recorded, let me know, and perhaps our administrative assistant will be able to edit that out, but I can't promise it. So try to be mindful of the fact that we're recording.
What exactly are we supposed to, are we just supposed to talk about it in general, or?
Why don't we say some things if anybody's congregation is doing something already? Like River Road, where Ursula and I are, we do Black Lives Matter vigil and common reads and other things to raise our awareness of the racism, systemic racism. How about others?
This is Judith in Boulder. We do have a racial justice group that was quite active a couple of years ago and then kind of took a break, but they've are reconstituting because of the recent activity. I need to get their mailing list for this right here, right now activity, because I think they'd be interested.
I live in Des Moines, Iowa, and there are several groups that have been working with our city council and mayor and city manager for at least 2 years, trying to pass an anti-racial profiling ordinance. The ACLU is involved, Black Lives Matter of Iowa, Nebraska, not Black Lives Matter, NAACP of Nebraska and Iowa are involved. Another community activist, statewide community activist group that's headquartered here in Des Moines, and other activists have been working on this probably 7 years, but most intensively the last couple of years. And just about 2 weeks ago, the council did pass an ordinance, which is an improvement, but the NAACP and ACLU have made it very clear that they feel there's a long way to go. So conversations will continue, and hopefully things will be better. And really in Des Moines, it's, you know, we haven't had anything like the killings that we have seen nationally. So it's kind of a preventative measure here, but there definitely is racial profiling by the Des Moines police that needs to stop.
Yeah, let me just add something here. Pablo de Jesus is my name. I'm the Executive Director of Unitarian Universalists for Social Justice. I'm happy to see plenty of faces that I recognize as wonderful UUSJ volunteers and participants. I'll just share with the group something that hasn't really come up in previous conversation, but one of my first volunteer internships out of college was with the Center for Constitutional Rights. And my very first project was actually on their police accountability, project. Now, I mostly got coffee for the attorneys, I'll be very honest, but I was able to internalize quite a bit. And at the time, we were looking at the Amadou Diallo situation. And at the time, those attorneys really talked about a cultural shift that needed to occur. And they were talking quite a number of years ago about a 20 to 30 year timeline. So really, when we're talking about this confluence of changing policy and changing culture, everybody who cares about these issues really needs to understand that what's unique and special about this moment is that many more people are tuning in, and it's up to those of us who care about the issues and care about the structural change dimension to really leverage that attention into some long-term substantive work to change the paradigm. So hopefully you guys are feeling that, not only with the Poor People's Campaign, but also the protests and just the general conversation in your congregations. And if you're not, then that's probably a good place to start. How are people reacting to this moment? What is different about this moment than has been in the past? And I'll remind folks that we had the pleasure of, what's his name? Mr. Bryant. He was a speaker during GA. And he underscored a couple of things. The people who are out in the street, they were first-time voters under Obama. And a lot of them really understood in a deep and sincere way that with the election of Obama, we were now in some version of a transition to a fully post-racial society. So a lot of the ire that is being expressed in the streets, it's not from those of us who are a smidge older than that, because we've been jaded already. We've seen the multiple years since Amadou Diallo and other things. It's the younger folks who are like, wait a minute, the social contract that I agreed to has been violated. So as you think about the work in your congregations, it's important to keep track of the two channels that are moving along age and around structure. I don't want to silence others. We have a few minutes. John, Pat?
Well, I'd like to go ahead. I'm looking at all of us. We are all white. I think in our congregation there, we do have some people who are certainly Black, who have most assuredly experienced this. That's a way to start. I think it's important for us to be taking this issue together as a congregation, and to have all racial groups involved. And one of the things that some of us are doing, the library system in this area is has invited the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist to speak. So we'll be doing that.
I don't want to interrupt too much, but Lavona's asking me to return to the main salon. So please continue your conversations and we'll see you in a few minutes.
Okay.
Hey, Lavona.
Hi, I guess we didn't pause the recording. I see it now going. Can you?
Did the recording follow you in other sessions?
Only did it once. I couldn't even see the record. Can you pause it? It's still recording.
Sure.
So 4 people instead. I did 4 people of 7. So hopefully you had a chance to make some good friends from that. Yeah. So, so are there any other questions about that? Otherwise, we'll just go in real quickly to how to submit your letters in this virtual world that we are now in.
I have a question.
Okay. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, how are you doing? I have tried to access my Zoom chats many times, and I can't seem to, even when I save them. How do I access my Zoom chats?
Okay. Yes.
So I'll try to take this one. So the easiest way, and it's important to remember, Zoom works differently on everybody's individual device, but in general, you go to the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. You press that. It usually opens a dialog box alongside the main viewing panel. And you go down to the bottom, the very, very bottom of that Zoom group chat. You press on the three little dots that are on the right-hand side.
Right.
And then there's usually something that says Save Chat. And then you press that, and it will download the chat at the moment that you execute that function. Normally what happens is that your computer saves it somewhere that's like a default setting. So you have to do in your Finder, if you're on a Mac, or in your whatever it is on a PC,
Yeah.
you can search
In the
for
Finder,
Zoom,
yeah.
and you look for something that has an appropriate date.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to get all the
But-
chat at the very end, then you want to save it at the very end.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So any other questions come up during the session, or anything somebody would like to just kind of share from the heart about this? It's
No,
important.
but did I get a commitment that you were gonna mail the contact, email the contact
Yeah.
information?
Mhm.
Good. That's
So
all.
we're gonna provide a follow-up email probably within 24-ish hours of this session. And
That's fine.
we'll include these materials, but we'll also invite you to the Wednesday session with the SHATS staffer. So if you
Sure.
think you want to drill down on the 1033 issues, we really want to put something in your calendar as soon as we're done.
Okay.
I would just like to get a feel from the group about their interest in such a meeting with the senator. Let's see, just a couple. Okay, we might promote a little more broadly.
No.
Okay. Okay. All right. If you have people in your congregation that might, we're unable to record it, so it would just be this opportunity to be with Trelane and talk to him about those issues. Okay, great. Well, so I would like to then talk about a little bit more, not a little bit more, but more about the how you submit. There's basically three ways. So on your Right Here, Right Now handout, and in the material also that we'll be sending again, you can mail it. You can mail it directly, to me, and we will take it. And because of COVID, and we're not, as you know, we're not going to the Hill. They're actually not accepting visitors yet. We will scan and send these to the appropriate staff people in these offices. And that's in addition to the normal way that most people do it, is by gathering up from their congregation the advocacy letters, and then they send an email to advocacy@UUSJ. So that's that. And then the third way is that we have an online form that we're trying out last couple of months, where you can upload a file. You can upload one for one senator, one for another. Or if you're the organizer in your congregation and you're able to batch, like say 6 or 8 or 10, into like a PDF document, you can upload that one as a, one document. So those links are in your handout, the Right Here, Right Now handout. And again, you can always access those on the home page of our website, right next to that carousel. There's a yellow box. Sometimes, depending on your browser, it might be below. And it's always on the advocacy page as well. So
We've
those
also populated it to the chat.
right. Okay. In addition, let's see. In addition, there is a, if you can go to your senator's website, and it's very easy to do, and they all look pretty much the same, and it'll say contact me, and then you go there and you can create your email. You can prepare it ahead of time, and you can cut and paste and put it in if you want. And so that is another means of doing it. We do like the, and please mention, maybe you can mention from UUSJ, that would be great, because again, this has to do with maintaining the relationships in these offices so that we can follow up with them. When we have the actual letters, we will be, that we scan and send to a staffer, we will then have our cover letter from UUSJ that will outline our position and our ask in it. We will send, again, we will be contacting like for North Carolina, we'll be finding out Tillerson Burr's the appropriate person in that office, and we will be sending it to those offices. So that's how we're going to be doing things, probably continuing through December until we're hopefully going back to Capitol Hill. Are there any questions about that? Of course, you can make a phone call. And I think because we have multiple things going on, you can make a phone call, maybe as a follow-up even. They keep track. The phone calls aren't treated quite the same way, but they track these. When they're done online, there is an algorithm that they use to kind of consolidate these, but they do track them. But that's why we like the personal letters, because they do treat those differently. They handle those differently, and that's where you can especially communicate their story, and those get pulled out and sometimes shared with the member of Congress. And they use the stories when they're giving presentations. They say things, I'm hearing from my constituents. This is another reason, it was asked early, why should we bother with this? It's because we want to give them a reason to say, I'm hearing from my constituents. They really want me to do something. There are thousands of bills that they consider. They don't have to speak up on all of them. So it's our job to tell them, to speak up and use our voice where we can on these issues. Keep the, up front. So I don't think I see any more questions. And
Pat is raising her real life hand.
Pat, real live hand. Hi, Pat.
Hi. I just wanted to, I just wanted to note that our senators are going to vote for this. So what we want to do is say thank you. We want to say Unitarian Universalists somewhere in there, and maybe even that we have some principles about which we feel very strongly, and that we are grateful for what they could do, and if we can ask them to talk to a Republican or something, I don't know.
Yes,
do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. To reach out across the aisle is sometimes how we refer to it in our letters, is to please reach out across the aisle. And there are links in the handout to find out who has co-sponsored the bill. So you should check that out, because if you're a senator, even though it might be a Democrat or leaning in that direction, if they haven't signed on yet, then you can encourage them to do that. You will notice that the link that is provided for the Senate bill doesn't have text there. And it's just the way it is right now. It is a companion bill. It is basically the same as the House version if you look at the House version. But Senator Booker's office, who just sent out a press release on this, but that is the actual Senate number. And the Senate generally does not consider a House bill if they have a similar or the same kind of companion bill. They will use their own bill and their that they will move forward on. All right. So with that being said, it's 2 minutes after. Thank you very much for joining us today. And for those of you that would like to continue, we can talk about some of the logistics about doing a Zoom for your congregation or any other details about that. And for those who've done this before, sometimes we just chat and have a conversation. You can shut off the, Pablo, you can please shut off the recording at the appropriate time. And do you have anything to share?